Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for this webinar. I hope you and your family are safe inside your respective homes, and I wish you all good health. My name is Vipul, and I am the marketing manager at VWO. I'll be your moderator for today. For those who are hearing about VWO for the first time, VWO helps you identify leaks in your conversion funnel and provides tools to fix those leaks and keep your revenue growing. So, with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, Vlad, who is the conversion rate optimization ninja at Clue Checkout. Vlad has been doing CRO for many of his clients from all the corners of the online landscape for the last 5+ years. One of the things that he likes to brag about is that for a good chunk of those 5 years, there was no moment when he wasn't running at least one CRO test. Feels great to have you here, Vlad.
Hey, Paul. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's great being here. And just before we begin, I want to reemphasize your message, people. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during this challenging period. I wish you all the health, and I assure you it will get better soon.
Perfect. Pleasure to have you here, Vlad. So before I let Vlad, introduce himself and start with his part of the presentation, I request everyone to ask any questions that you might have during the course of this presentation using the GoToWebinar's questions panel on your right. With that, Vlad, let's begin.
Thank you. So to get right into it then, today I'll share our experience with card localization. At the checkout, we're constantly running A/B tests with thousands of customers that have traffic from all around the world. And because of this, we have the opportunity to gather a lot of experience with regional preferences and optimization. And I strongly believe that knowledge is here to be shared. So I'm here to share this with you so you can apply the learnings to your business and increase your revenue without having to go through the hassle of running all these tests yourselves. Even though, as with any CRO webinar, it is strongly advised that you also repeat these tests on your traffic. Okay, so to get into localization method that you can do, we first need to establish what localization is and how it is done. We know that card localization is a thing because we know everyone is different, right? So if we accept that different cultures have different culinary preferences, for example, we must also agree that different cultures have different shopping habits. And the short description of localization is this. Your global conversion rate revenue is not really a single number. It is in fact made up of the conversion rate of each country you sell in. And by optimizing each country, you will maximize in turn your global conversion rate. So now that we know what is card localization, let's get into how we go about it. And the first thing I want to emphasize here is localization is a process. And the first step to that process is to understand who your visitors are. And to do that, you need to be able to analyze your traffic and determine what your top markets are. And this top market refers to the countries where you get most of your traffic from. Ideally, you want to focus on the countries you get most traffic from, but also have a lower conversion rate than your average, since those will be the biggest increase opportunities for you. In this chart here, I emphasize 2 countries from the example of 6 of them. The bars here are the amount of traffic you're receiving in those countries, and the line here is the conversion rate. So you can see we highlighted the 2 candidates with the highest traffic and the lowest conversion rate, because again, that's where you will be able to draw out most revenue from. The second step of localizing your card, after you have gathered the data and have the plan, the next step is making sure you have the functionality available. And you basically need to control what users see based on the country they come from. And there are a few ways to go about this. We will quickly go into them a bit later. But regardless of the technical solution you choose, think of it like the reverse of a funnel, right? Users come in from one direction, but they are sent off into multiple different ones based on their geographic location. And then the last step of this process, once you know what the improvement opportunities are and you can geo-segment, the next step is to find out what you can actually do in order to improve your performance in those countries. We do this generally by A/B testing different things in different countries, and this is what we'll mostly focus today on, as I'm going to share some of our A/B test learnings and best practices with you. Again, as mentioned, it is important for you to also do this on your traffic. So what I'll be sharing are best practices, and a lot of them you will be able to apply by yourself. However, you still need to validate them for your audiences. Before we go into the actual content, I want to play devil's advocate for a second and go through the main argument against card localization that we usually see, which is the fact that it is a big research investment. Since you're not optimizing for oil traffic, you're focusing on each market, so the returns of the optimizations are diminished. Sorry. And while that is true, it is easy to forget that in unusual online global business, around 70% of the traffic comes from 3 or 4 top markets. So you really don't have to focus on all the countries, but rather on those big ones. And in the pie chart above, you can see a normal traffic breakdown we're usually seeing with our customers. And notice how USA has around 30% of the traffic, Canada has 17, UK has 12, and France has 11, I believe. Added up, those 4 markets sum up to 70% of the total traffic received. And this means that by increasing the conversion rate in those countries by 10%, you'll also see a global revenue increase of 7%, which is actually a really pretty number. Okay, moving on, just to give you a real world example, I use this quite often. The easiest way to visualize and understand what localization is and why we need it is answer the following question. How likely would you be to buy a coffee from your favorite coffee shop on the corner if they asked for a different currency one day? So let's say tomorrow you go and get a coffee, and instead of your local currency, they ask for, I don't know, pesos or something different. I think you wouldn't get that coffee because that's an inconvenience you don't want, and the online user is the same. So we know purchases are made on trust, and as a human being, we tend to trust what we know, which is even more important on the checkout page where you want all the trust in the world. Now that we agree on why we want to localize the card, let's briefly discuss about how to actually do it. And it can be done in 2 main ways. For the sake of keeping it simple, I will call them manual localization and automatic localization. However, do keep in mind that both of them are somewhat automatic, since they both rely on detecting the user's location at some point or another. You don't really want to ask the user which country they are from before entering your website. But we call it manual localization because it basically means having different landing pages or even different websites altogether for each country. And in this scenario, you would most likely route traffic from different ad campaigns or something like that to each target. However, I think you can see how this can get really hard to manage and cumbersome at a certain point. Which is exactly where automatic localization comes in. We call it automatic localization because it is the capability of recognizing a user's location by IP on a web page and dynamically changing his experience on the spot. So this doesn't involve the need of having different landing pages or websites. We're talking about the same page, just minor tweaks. And a good example for this is when a website detects your browser language and changes its display language automatically. In the example on screen, we're looking at a basic checkout page in the USA, and please take note of the local support number highlighted, the currency, and the payment method sections. Now let's switch the location of our virtual user, and we can do this for testing purposes by using a VPN, since we're detecting the location via IP. And we're now in Netherlands. You can again take a look at the phone number, which now has a Netherlands prefix. Also, the currency is now euro instead of USD, and the payment methods have also changed to include the local one specific to the country. So this is what we mean by automatic geolocation. We didn't switch the page, but we made certain adjustments on it. And we're seeing the same changes when switching to Brazil. Additionally, here we're also seeing an extra field in the form that allows the user to pay with credit card installments. And that's a bit of a spoiler. We'll talk more about that later in the presentation. To wrap the two types of localization, we think automatic localization is easier to scale since there's less maintenance involved. It's more reliable since it's less prone to human error. And the best part about it is that a lot of online e-commerce platforms already have it out of the box. To check out, for example, offers geolocation. Hey, yeah, sure, Vipul.
Sorry for interrupting you, but I had a question there on your previous slide itself. So that's a great point that you made about localizing the support number, the support the phone numbers, the currency and all. But don't you think it would be a bit of problematic for businesses to translate, let's say, something which is a reasonable amount, let's say $10 is a reasonable amount for a certain product in the US, but it might not be a reasonable amount to pay for that similar product in, let's say, India or let's say Dubai. So won't that be a friction?
I think that's a great point you're making, and we would most likely be able to run a webinar on that one by itself. Yeah, so pricing in different pricing in different countries is something that we have tested with before, and it's great. It can give you revenue increases of 5 to 15%. However, it is a lot. It does involve a lot of optimizing and resources. I won't be touching on it in this webinar again because I wanted to focus on the quick ones. But yeah, it's a great idea to do if you have the necessary resources because definitely different markets have different pricing preferences. Of course, we know that markets differ globally. Did I answer your question, Vipul?
Yeah, understood.
Awesome. Let's proceed then. Yeah, so I was telling you about how automatic geo-detection is the way to go, especially because a lot of e-commerce platforms have it by default. To check out offers geolocation and automatically switches the language, the currency, and other stuff like that. And a quick pro tip here, if you want more control over your pages without having to code yourself, you can actually use BWO to geo-segment and change whatever you like in whichever country. That is one kind of out-of-the-box way of using BWO, but I find it really, really useful. Okay, so moving on to the actual content now. Now that we got the basic stuff out of the way, let's talk about actual methods for you to localize and increase your revenue streams. On the next slides, we will go through some of the best local optimizations we've found and the ones that you can easiest apply to your cart. And here's the plan. First, I'll give you some insights into using local payment methods. Then we'll go through optimizing the cart flow and how that can bring you extra revenue. And finally, I'll rapid fire and mention a bundle of smaller cart localization methods to you. You may already know about some of these localization methods in theory, but today I will try and give you some insights that you maybe don't know and also put some numbers on everything I say so that you can prioritize implementing them in your business. And the first one we're starting with is local payment methods. And this is actually a topic that we had to check out close to our heart. So we're confident when we say it's a really big improvement opportunity for you. And that's partly because globally, local payment methods account for about 10% of the total purchases being made online. And that might not sound like much. However, in certain countries, local payment methods actually have more than 50% of the market share. And this means that every other person that visits your online shop wants to pay with something local rather than a credit card or PayPal. And it's easy to kind of believe that everyone has a credit card or PayPal account handy. But the truth is that many customers will not purchase if their local preferred payment method or card brand isn't available. A reason behind this is the operation of benefit programs. And a quick explanation on that. A lot of local payment method providers have benefit programs in place which give extra points or even cashback to buyers when they use their local payment methods. By allowing users to pay with local payment methods, you're basically giving them extra benefits to purchase your product, but without having to support any cost on your side. Another factor that plays to the advantage of local payment methods are, of course, authorization rates. From our data, we've noticed that local payment methods generally have around 15% higher authorization rates. And this, of course, translates to even more revenue from you. That's why we think this is a big increase opportunity. By adding a few local payment methods to your checkout page, you will benefit from 5 to 10% global increases in revenue. Especially if you're selling in some of the key markets we'll be talking about now. And now I want to go to some of the biggest local payment methods we know exist, because local payment methods are not born equal. Some have higher market shares than others, so some will bring you bigger revenue increases than others. While ideally, of course, you would want to have all payment methods available in your checkout page. I am aware that's not so easy to implement. So we try to compress our learnings and give you a map of the most important local payment methods that you really want to have if some of your countries are on this list. And again, these are not all the important payment methods, but they are the ones with the biggest revenue shares. And some highlights here are Brazil, for example, which has 56% of the total payment being made via local payment methods. Boleto Bancário and credit card installments, the one I mentioned earlier, those are really important. Netherlands then has 53% of the traffic paying with Ideal. And then China is the poster child because it has 74% of orders being placed with either Alipay and WeChat Pay. So you can see how you could potentially double or even triple your revenue in those countries only by adding those payment methods to your checkout page. The last thing I want to mention in regards to local payment methods is that you do need to make sure they are easy to find and accessible to the users in the cart. And this is as important as actually having them, because even if you have all the local payment methods in the world, if you hide them under a drop-down, for example, no one will use them and you won't see any revenue impact. We have run several A/B tests on this matter, and the most important things we found here is that local payment methods need to be displayed in the first section of the card, need to be clearly visible, and need to have recognizable logos. And let me give you the best example I can think of regarding local payment methods place one. Here are two sections of the checkout page, two different checkout pages, so to speak. How many payment methods do you think there are available in each section? And yeah, you're right, that was a trick question because on both pages, exactly 5 local payment methods are available. However, the example on the right shows a bad usage of local payment methods because you can see them in the drop-down. You have no way of knowing local payment methods are supported on this page. The example on the left, however, has visible logos and is positioned right above the summary page, making it really easy for the user to know those are available before he makes a decision. And one extra thing you can do to optimize payment method usage, and this is kind of going the extra mile, is dynamically displaying and arranging them based on the user's location. So you can see how in the second example, I'm prioritizing the icons of the local payment methods based on their usage in that country. You can do so yourself. And just to give you a better understanding of what I mean, there's really no point in showing Alipay, which is a really popular payment method in China, to a user coming from Brazil. So you want to make sure that you display the accurate and correct ones for each country. Okay, that was it all for payment methods. Now moving on to card flow optimization. And to understand how you can use it, let me first explain what I mean when I say cart flow. I'm specifically referring to the length of the purchase funnel. And there are three main steps on any purchase funnel. There's the summary section, the first one, where you want to remind the user what he's purchasing. Then there's the checkout section, where the user actually enters his details, like credit card and billing info. And then there's the review section, where the user confirms his entered information and places the order. Those three sections can be rearranged and modified into multiple combinations. If all three are on separate pages, we call it a three-step flow. However, we can combine the summary and the checkout sections to create a two-step flow, like you see right here. And then we can even remove the review section entirely and create a simple one-step flow. Moving forward, we'll only talk about the two-step flow versus a one-step flow, since that's those are the ones we found to convert best in our cases. We're basically asking the following question: which country prefers having a review page and which country doesn't? Just to simplify that whole explanation I just did. Okay, so traditionally, extending the length of the purchase funnel is not the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about increasing your conversion rate. As marketers, we're told and we learn that less is better, and we always try to remove steps from our funnel. However, by adding a review page in some of your top markets and making sure each country is taken through their preferred cart flow will and can give you global improvements of up to 20%. Cart flow is one of my favorite ways of quickly boosting revenue. By the way, this is I think of it as the lowest and juiciest hanging fruit of all, because by doing this you can see huge revenue increases. And it is one of the fastest way you can optimize, because most e-commerce platforms offer multiple types of cart flows out of the box. So you can simply switch between them and A/B test them with something like a URL parameter. You don't have to invest any resources into this. So it's a really easy revenue boost. And we have done quite a lot of A/B testing on cart flow, and it turns out that there are big regional preferences when it comes to the length of the flow. For example, US shoppers prefer a one-page flow that you can see over here in the first example, where the summary and the checkout pages are combined and there is no review page. However, some Europe shoppers like to have that review page present in a two-step flow. So they like to be able to review their order before placing the transaction. And on the next slide, I'll show you our findings from the A/B tests that we've ran regarding this. We did our best to gather everything into a single table that can tell you if a country prefers a review page or not. And this is how it looks. And a few things to note here. Germany shows a really strong preference of 77% conversion rate increase for a flow without a review page. And I think that maybe that's because their culture is based on efficiency, and an extra step might be considered redundant. So they just want to purchase as fast as possible. And by the way, this is an extra tip. This is actually the reason why Germany's preferred payment method is PayPal as opposed to credit card. So that has the highest market share in Germany. And as a bonus mention here, if you sell in Germany, besides not having a review page, I would also recommend using PayPal Express, which is PayPal's fastest checkout solution that doesn't involve the user writing his details in the card, but rather simply logging into PayPal. Other mentions, US and Australia, are also consistently choosing a simpler flow, a one-step flow, even if not by the same margin as Germany. However, as you can see here, a lot of countries, specifically some in the EU, show a clear preference towards having a review page, so having a two-step flow. UK, Italy, Canada, France, Japan, and Spain all prefer having a review page and are showing 5 to 20% conversion rate increase. So I think you can see from this table how simply switching and playing with that can greatly increase your conversion rate if you try and match everything to your traffic's preferences. Now, because we don't really have a lot of time, I could go through like 10 or 20 other optimization methods and show you data for all of them. but I will quickly go through some other methods of localizing your card, and those are not necessarily lesser methods, as they can still bring you really big revenue increases. So you should think of them like a bundle of mini improvements that, when put together, will bring your business great revenue increases, even more than what we already discussed. The first one is translating and localizing your content. This is an obvious one. Not everyone speaks English and not everyone thinks the same. So that's why it's always recommended to work with a native speaker when translating your card, rather than using Google Translate or another similar solution, which might be pretty hit or miss. Then you can also localize your pricing. This is something that people you mentioned. Billing in the local currency is known to improve the authorization rates. That's the first one, because a lot of banks have troubles with international currencies. Then displaying the card in the user's currency is another great way to maximize your conversion rate. And this relates to the example with the coffee that I was talking about. Next, you should make sure that you display taxes in the locally preferred method. In the US, everyone is accustomed to seeing taxes separate from the total price, usually below the total price. But in EU, however, you should include them in the price. We are accustomed to seeing the total price include the taxes. And additionally, we also call taxes VAT. So you might want to play with that and make sure that you use the specified term in each country. In the next one, I've encompassed date, time, colors, and formatting into one category. But what I'm basically trying to say here is that you should take into account cultural preferences of a certain country when optimizing for it. And again, it is good to work with someone from that country and ask them for feedback. You don't have to start a program of translating and all your content. It's easy enough to have someone on a freelancer help you with some guidelines here. Also, obviously, having local support numbers builds trust and gives you your shop credibility. When was the last time you dialed an international number when trying to buy something online? And if the answer to that question is not yesterday, then you should have a localized support number in your checkout page. And lastly, a big one, you make sure you look at your card's loading time on a per country basis. I see this mistake a lot of times. Someone looks at their loading time and they give one number, like the global loading time. However, that's not really accurate, since that number is an average of countries you might not even be selling in. So make sure you again, like for conversion rate, make sure you look at loading time for each of your top markets. And while this optimization is not as easy to implement as some others, you should definitely try to optimize your load time in the top markets you have. This is a really big optimization that you can do, and it also obviously helps with conversion rate, even though it's a bit harder to track. Okay, I also want to give you a heads up on the countries where making those changes will bring you the biggest conversion rate increases. While I suggest you try and localize in all the countries you're selling in, that can be quite a big resource investment. I am aware of that. So you can use this cheat sheet of the countries that are most sensitive to having the card translated. So if any of your top markets are on this list, you should definitely prioritize them. In the right column, you can see the actual conversion rate increase you can get by translating the checkout page in that country's language. For example, translating your card for Russia will give you conversion rate increases of up to 42% just by translating. While in Brazil, Germany, and France, you're looking at around a 22% extra revenue. So all in all, to put a number on anything, by translating your card and applying all those other small changes in the mini bundle, you will see a global increase of up to 25%. Add that up to the extra revenue I was talking about with card flow and local payment methods, and you are looking at a business-changing increase over here. However, if some of them are too resource intensive for your business plan, you can definitely always focus on a few of them and still get some nice revenue increases. Okay, that was everything I wanted to go through today. I know I talked a lot and pretty fast. So I'll give you a few key takeaways of the most important things we discussed. First, the first step of localizing your cart is knowing who your visitors are. Once you pinpoint your top markets, you can find out what they like. Then by applying all the learnings we've discussed in your top markets, you can see global revenue increases between 15 and 30%. One of the bigger optimizations you can do is adding local payment methods. However, do make sure you make them easily visible in the cart. Customizing the cart flow and adding or removing a review page on a per country basis is the fastest way to boost your cart's conversion rate. Remember the low-hanging fruit one. And lastly, as with any CRO webinar, best practices are good, but we always recommend A/B testing for your own top markets. And now that we got that out of the way, I have a small bonus for you, some quick A/B test ideas that you can run starting tomorrow, actually, to help you kickstart your localization program. The first one is testing cart flow on a per country level. As mentioned, this is one of the easiest ways of maximizing your revenue, especially if your payments provider has more cart flow options out of the box. You should run this test in your top 5 markets at least, and then optimize each with the winning variations. Second, you should add local payment methods like Alipay and Carte Blue in your top markets. This by itself will get your revenues increase, but then you can also A/B test their placement in the checkout page afterwards to maximize your earnings. You should test icons, size maybe, or placement before the summary section or after the summary section, and things like that. Lastly, and this is a bit of a wild card, I propose trying to test different pre-selected payment methods in certain markets. We did this in Germany, for example, by pre-selecting PayPal instead of credit card, and we saw 15% improvement in the conversion rate. And what I mean by pre-selected payment methods is the one you see when you open the checkout page without clicking anything else. It is usually in 90% of the cases the credit card. However, you should definitely try switching that out for anything else. Okay, that was it for me and for my presentation. I think we still have 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So let me know what you thought was most interesting and what you would like me to explain more in depth.
Hey Vlad, that was really an interesting presentation. I was very closely listening to it. So that some really great points there, and of course, all of them make sense in terms of because the checkout page is the last mile of conversion, and you wouldn't want to mess up with that. You have to maintain and even build the trust that the customer has shown till that point that they have reached that page. So you can't really mess up by having them to think again about what's on that page. So that's really important for any business who have an online transaction sort of feature available on their website.
Yeah, that's true. We usually joke around and say that our job on the checkout page is to make sure we don't get in the shopper's way. But the truth is we have a lot of opportunities, especially because of the high conversion rate of the page, to test really a lot of things. And you will see that pretty much every small thing you test on the checkout page can bring you big revenue increases, which is really interesting.
And absolutely. And the numbers that you just mentioned in last couple of slides are, speak it very loudly about how customizations, optimizations like these actually, increase the numbers and take your growth graph, so as to speak, up and to the right. So definitely would encourage everyone, whoever has an e-commerce business, no matter small or big, do go ahead and test out what type of localization changes actually move the needle in a positive direction too. So definitely, we'll be sharing the slides and the recording of this webinar after this presentation, of course, within the next 24 hours. So do watch it again and go through the slides again. It is really insightful for you guys. Great. So I have a lot of questions, I would say, Vlad. Definitely shows how much people are interested in this particular topic. So I'll try to, pick them up, the most useful ones rather, one by one. And yeah, let's go with the first one. The first
Yeah.
one is by Munib Afzal. He is actually referring to one of your earlier slides about, I think, content localization, in which you had mentioned about the automatic and the manual way of doing it. So he just is curious to know which is the most preferred method here. Would it be automatic or would it be manual? And in which cases, you would apply them?
Yeah, so that's a good question. First, let me re-emphasize the fact that automatic and manual are pretty much nicknames, not necessarily the accurate way of referring to them. But from my point of view, the automatic method of changing dynamic things on the page is better for you because, well, firstly, it doesn't require you having multiple domains or landing pages. Is way easier to manage. And secondly, you can definitely use some platforms like VWO to help you handle that even faster. I see the manual method as more of a solution when you split up your business in different countries, right? So that makes sense if you have different entities for each country, for example. But if not, I think the automatic one allows you to grow way faster, and you should definitely focus on that.
Great answer there, Vlad. Definitely would recommend, doing that. Okay, so the second question is from Alex. Alex is asking, okay, this is an interesting one. Are you suggesting this currency conversion on the entire website or just the checkout page?
Definitely on the entire website, and that is an incredibly good question. It's really important to have consistency when talking about localization. So, and this includes translations. For example, it's really misleading if you have your landing page translated, but then the checkout page isn't. For example, that might turn your customer around. But it's even more important when talking about prices. Try and show exactly the same format on your whole website, if that's possible, because that will kind of the user will perceive the price, will understand it, and then if he doesn't see anything different, he will be way more likely to also purchase.
Sure. Quickly moving to this third question, Mohammed is asking, okay, so he's concerned about the drop off when a customer moves from your website to a payment aggregator website. So he just wants to know if there is any insight on this drop off, because he keeps losing his clients whenever they are redirected to a payment aggregator website. So do you have
Yeah, that's a common
any answer to that?
Yeah, that's a common one. That's one we fought with a lot at the checkout. From our learnings, it happens because of one of two, actually three reasons. The one is the customer wasn't expecting to see a checkout page at that point. And that's, I mean, the basic way of describing that is if you click a page and you see some credit card fields that you weren't expecting to see, you will automatically exit that page. And to fight with that, you can maybe do somewhat of a more explicit job in letting the users know they will be redirected to a checkout page. Then a second reason we see quite often is load time, actually. Which is why I was mentioning this is important to also discuss. It might be that users want to purchase and they click the buy now button, they are taken to the checkout page, but because it loads a bit slower, they don't have the patience to wait for it. So you might want to look into that. And then the third reasoning behind this is, because the lack of the consistency, and this is not really limited to words or price. This can even be something because of your design. So if you have a design language on your website and then the checkout page looks different, that might definitely make the user think that they're not in the same process anymore. So if you can look into those three, I'm sure that you can find a solution for this. And just a have a bonus here, you could definitely opt for a on-website solution. So I know there are methods of displaying the checkout page without redirects. For example, we have a pop-up cart. It's called the inline cart. And that way you kind of eliminate some of the concerns I just mentioned.
Great. Hope you got your answer there, Mohammed. The next question is from Soren. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, Soren. She has an interesting question. She's asking about the trends in customer behavior, such as cart flow preference. How does it change over time? And how important is A/B testing for companies regarding customer behavior analysis?
That's a really good question. It's like as if Soren knows. Yeah, so we have seen definitely if there was one thing in all I listed that switches the most is cart flow, which is why I kind of re-emphasize that you should test this for your traffic. Because it does really depend on a lot of things. Country is one of them, but we have also seen preferences when comparing B2B and B2C products, or even preferences when comparing prices, different prices on products. So this is one of the more dynamic ones, and you should definitely A/B test this on your traffic, which is why it's really good that it's easy to set up generally.
Thanks, Vlad. I see a couple of people are really impressed about that one slide of yours wherein you have mentioned what payment method works for which particular region, and a couple of people actually want to know what how they can basically figure out which payment method works in which country. So do you think do you have a list, or maybe do you have a source that you can point them to figure out which to know basically which payment method is preferred by which country?
Yeah, well, the short question to that is the short answer. Sorry to that is that's why you have me. This is gathered from data we have at the checkout, so it's from live transactions, and is the most reliable way of knowing what payment method to focus on. However, I'm sure that you can find kind of similar articles when searching even on Google your top website. And again, a really authentic way of finding this out is talking with someone from that country, because they will most likely know what are the most used payment methods. At the checkout, we always try and focus on the most used payment methods. So I think we even have some articles on this. So if you even search on in our blog, you might find a lot of information on this.
Sure, guys. Do follow what Vlad just mentioned. Okay, it's getting a bit hard to figure out which question to actually pick. So I'll pick this one. There are a lot of questions, Vlad. There are indeed a lot of questions. Uh, Let me pick this
Well,
one.
throw them at
This is an
me.
interesting one. It's an interesting one. I'll club. Okay, I'll ask them separately. So this one person is asking, I sell mostly in the US. So what are some optimizations I can do for the US audience?
That's a good one, because I imagine a lot of people listening to this webinar sell mostly in the US. So from the top of my head, the most important thing in the US is firstly not having a review page. From our tests, or at least testing, removing the review page if you have one. We have noticed that to be quite a factor. Then I suggest optimizing your summary section, showing prices without taxes and showing the taxes separately. Obviously, make sure you have the currency set as US. I have never in my life met an American who purchased something in a different currency than US dollars. So you want to do that. What else? Make sure you have PayPal Express available. Again, US is as Germany pretty much efficiency focused, so they do like that fast checkout. And I would say those are a few good optimizations. Obviously, the risk can definitely go on, and obviously it does depend on your traffic. Those are just a few headliners.
Right. Thanks, Lad. The next question is from Karthikeya. Karthikeya is asking, and I'm sure a lot of people will have the similar question as well. So when you say about localizing the currency and all, would you need a different company bank account in that respective country as per their local payment method?
Yeah, that's a good one. Localizing the currency is usually broken down into two things. The first one is localizing the display currency, and that you can do by yourself, even though it's a bit cumbersome to do the conversion. It can be done by yourself on your website. However, the second part of this is localizing the billing currency, so what you actually charge, which, yeah, unfortunately, you do need an entity in each country you want to localize to. However, sorry for the plug here, but there are platforms that do this by default, so you don't have to create businesses in each country you're selling into. To check out, for example, offers this by default. So we charge the customer in any currency you can think of, and then we send you the dollars, basically, or whatever you prefer. That's the easiest way of doing this, but you can definitely do it yourself with kind of starting a legal business in each country and all that stuff.
Sure. Thanks, Lloyd. Hope you got the answer there, Karthikeya. Great. So in the interest of time, I'll just take one more question here, Vlad. Guys, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I will skip a few questions from a few of you guys. So, but don't worry, I'll be sending all your questions to Vlad and his team, and along with your email addresses, so that Vlad can answer them directly to you, right? So no need to worry about your questions being missed. Uh, Great. So the last question that I have for you, Vlad, is what pages of my website should I translate first?
Yeah, that's a good one when talking about resource investment. As I was mentioning, a lot of us might not have the resources necessary to do all the website. I would say, again, consistency is key here, but I would say try and focus on your regular or most used purchase funnel. So start from your landing page, your product page, or whatever steps you have. Just make sure you cover all the steps that the user usually goes through when purchasing your product. It is important to localize all of them, or at least the ones usually used, because if not, you will create friction and confusion for the customers.
Right. And one highlight I have from all the answers and all the presentation that you gave is that it is very necessary to first research, right? So don't just go ahead and start localizing just for the sake of it. It's important if to figure out whether the audience really needs the kind of optimizations that you just learned about. So I think Vlad would also agree. You have to first see whether putting, let's say, PayPal as your first as the preferred payment method would definitely work or not. Uh, Test it out by running it for a sample audience that you have. See how much of the reception, how much of the engagement is that particular payment method getting, and only then move forward in terms of making it available for the entire customer base from that particular region. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vlad.
Definitely agree. That's a really important one. Thanks for highlighting that. Yeah, researching is always good. Even the information I presented today, those are best practices, and they did apply in all our testing. However, you should definitely kind of take them with a grain of salt and test them yourself. So yeah, the research stage is really important.
Great. So yeah, with that, Vlad, thank you so much for all the answers, and thank you so much for your effort that you've put into creating such an insightful presentation. I'm sure the audience must have loved it and definitely grabbed insights that they will definitely use in their respective businesses. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really fun. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Sure, lad. Most definitely, we'll do a next one soon. Great. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much for attending this webinar today. Really loved having you all here. Uh, it is time to close this webinar. And once this webinar is closed, you will be presented with a survey. Please fill in this survey so that we have a pulse of how did we do, and it would definitely make us work towards creating better content that you would like to hear in the future. So yeah, with that, thank you so much for coming and attending this webinar. Stay safe and stay inside your homes. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, guys. Stay safe.